Satnam, and welcome to the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast. I am Veronica Barragan, and today my co-host, beautiful co-host Elvira and I, are exposing one of the most overlooked consequences of generational trauma. What I'm referring to is disassociation. And this isn't just like zoning out or feeling distracted. What I'm referring to is deep disassociation, physiological, spiritual disconnection, a survival response that literally becomes ingrained in our DNA generation after generation after generation due to a lot of unprocessed pain, a lot of suppression of emotions, and let me tell you, too much fear. Disassociation is not random. In fact, many women don't even know that they are disassociating. It is a response to trauma that has been carried through your lineage, and it manifests as things like numbness, disconnection, and the inability to fully experience life. But here's the truth, and this is what Elvira and I are going to share with you today. This cycle can be broken. The same way that trauma is inherited, healing can be also passed down today. So, today in this episode, we're going to be breaking it all down for you. The scientific aspect of disassociation. We're going to look at what happens in your nervous system when disassociation takes over. We're going to look at the energetics behind disassociation, look at the Kundalini yoga therapy perspective as to relates to how we can repair the body's ability to feel safe and whole again. And then we're going to also look at A Course in Miracles spiritual perspective to dismantle the ego, the programming, the grip on disassociation, and reconnect with the truth of who we are. Healing starts now. Let's reclaim our sovereignty, our vitality, and let's begin. How are you, Elvira?
Morning. I'm doing amazing. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing as well. I'm feeling really, really grateful to God, and especially grateful that we get to talk about what we're going to talk about today because you don't know what you don't know. That was one of the most wisest things you've said in our podcast, and disassociation is definitely about not knowing what you don't know. And I think that this episode is going to be a big wake-up call for a lot of women because for a long time, I know in my journey of generational healing, I was completely disassociated, completely disconnected, numb, and honestly just felt lost in this world, living in one world where the trauma that I had experienced had never occurred, and living and then subconsciously, unconsciously feeling the emotions and the triggers and all of the things that come with those patterns of generational trauma that I was numbing, running away from, and literally just pretending to be someone who I was not. So I think that this is something that a lot of women don't even know that they're going through. And I also feel that it's very important to become aware of it and not with any shame or guilt, but just so that you know when you're doing it and the biological reasons why it's happening and actually how to stop it from happening. Do you feel that, like, in your journey of healing, there was ever a moment where you felt like disassociated? Or what does disassociation mean to you?
No, yes. Right now, before we started recording, I started thinking about what we were talking about. And I remember how something happened in my childhood that I completely blocked out. And it wasn't until my later teenage years that I was like, oh, wait a minute, this happened. And this was not okay. And it should have never have happened. And then even yesterday, I was having a conversation with my sister where it's like I've always known, like how we were talking last week, like when we go through our awakening or whatever you want to call it, what we knew, what we thought wasn't,
Mm,
like deep down, I've always known like something was off or something wasn't okay, something wasn't like I've always known, but I didn't want to see it. Even with like certain people, family or whatever, certain situations, like I knew that wasn't okay. Like I knew that wasn't what I thought it was, but I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to accept it because it was too painful to actually acknowledge it and really bring it out. And it was affecting me how I was. I was very angry and it tensed up because I was trying to like, no, not accept it and not see it, that it was
yeah.
making this.
Yeah. That I think that's such a perfect explanation because it's the fear facing these things that have been unsurmountable in our lives. When we're children, especially when we go through any kind of trauma, we learn to not feel safe in our bodies, but we also learn, like the pure, beautiful young children that we are, to create a fantasy world where in this fantasy world, we are protected and we don't have to face these things. And that's what a lot of people and that have gone through generational trauma don't even realize, that they are completely disassociated. I've had conversations with women, especially on the one-on-one situation, where like they come to me the first week and they're like, "Oh, there's nothing in my childhood. There's nothing that I have to forgive. Nothing." We start them on some Kundalini yoga meditation. We start them on A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy. By the second week, they're in tears, completely crying, because basically they've learned for however old they are to run away from these very scary things. And that's even more serious when, even as an adult later, you still are not seen and acknowledged by your parents. And it's more and more common than we think. Like when we think about generational trauma, like nobody wants to talk about it. They just want to tuck it under the rug. And we're living in such epic times where there's a few combinations that are happening. Why shit is hitting the fan is what I'm calling it, because people are realizing that what happened to them in their childhood was not right. And there's a few things that are causing that. Number one, and then we'll get into like scientific explanation, plant medicine. Okay. There's a revolution in plant medicine. And next week, you and I are going to take on spiritual psychosis and we're going to talk deeper about that, because people don't understand that plant medicine, like mushrooms, like Mother Ayahuasca. I would never just go to a random place in the United States where it's not even legal unless they're a church. Like when I went to the jungle, like I studied a lot. I researched. I made sure that I was going to a place that was safe and sacred. And then I also, thank God, found a great integration method afterwards. I want to leave this more for next week's episode, but plant medicine, what people don't realize, and even cannabis, we have way more access to cannabis now. So what it does is that it drops all the barriers you've developed in the subconscious mind. It's not a walk in the park, and you're shown what exactly you've been blocking for so long. But guess what? So does Kundalini yoga meditation, because Kundalini yoga meditation is the science of energy. And what it does is that it works right at the nervous system, right at the brain level, so that it works in the subconscious mind. So all these barriers that you've been putting up, they start to fall off and to fall off and to fall off. And that's what you were describing, that you were like, I thought reality was like this, but it's not. It's like this. Same thing that happened with me. And it wasn't just with plant medicine. It was also with the Kundalini yoga, because with the Kundalini yoga, I was able to integrate. Oh my God, that's what that meant. Oh my God, all this time, I thought it was like this and it's not. So there's plant medicine, there's deep meditation now that people are integrating that maybe in the past they were not. And then I also believe that the position of Mother Earth, I think it's inevitable. I truly do believe the second coming of Christ consciousness is the way that the earth is coming back into the center of the Milky Way. This was prophesied by so many people. What this means is that we're bringing the darkness to the light. It's being revealed. And because of that, so many of us are in shock of all this darkness and all these things we've had to face. And the thing is also, we have doctors like Dr. Gabor Mate, who's finally talking about these things. So people, I feel, are, my God, it wasn't okay what happened to me. My God, this is why I am the way I am. My God, I have been completely disconnected. I've seen way more people have deep spiritual awakenings and all of these different things. And I feel like it's a combination of all those things. Have you also been seeing this more and more?
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with, it's been so normalized, even in our families, our lineage, like this is how it is.
Hmm.
So patterns keep repeating themselves, and you're like, we disassociate because we're like, that's how it is. That's how it's always been. You don't question it. So you keep repeating these things and you're having these feelings, but deep down, you're like, there's, at least for me, deep down, like even as a child, I knew something was off. I knew something wasn't right, like it wasn't okay. but you didn't question it because you couldn't question the lineage. You couldn't question the elders. You're like, they don't say anything's wrong.
Yeah.
They're acting like everything's fine, so it must be okay. So
Yeah.
you're just going through it and you ignore it. But physically, I could feel it because my nervous system was so tensed up. I was so stressed out. I was just that flight and fight mode and just trying to keep it together. Even yesterday, my sister was like, now I understand why you were always so tensed up. Like you were always stressed out because I was trying to keep it together, but it was just coming out of me. Like something's not okay. Something's wrong here. Something has to change. But I was so used to like, you don't question. You
Yeah.
don't question like authority. But you don't, because they're the authority, you don't question. That's the way it is. That's the way they say it is. And and you keep moving forward until you start sitting with yourself and the meditation. And people sometimes they'll be like, I want to do the plant medicine. I won't do that. That's fine. But sometimes, like I said before, we don't even sit with our emotions.
Right.
We don't even let ourselves feel because we're so in this busy life. That's me myself right now. I've been frustrated because I'm trying to balance work and life and eat healthy. And I'm like, when am I supposed to have time to do all of this?
No.
They'll sit down and meditate and do it. And a lot of people don't meditate. They don't even sit with their emotions. They won't even process it because they're like, I don't have time. I don't have time to even cry right now and feel and because I need to go to work. I need to make dinner. And we just disconnect completely until we can't do it anymore. And then I'm glad we're doing next week the psychosis because I do see there's a lot of mental illness happening. And I think that's the path of what road are you going to choose? Are you going to work on yourself to try to heal this because it's possible, or you're really going to go down the opposite way? But we have to come here first and learn about what is actually happening before we could do the next step.
Yeah, and that's the challenging part because when you're disassociated, you don't know you're disassociated. Like you just think that this is the way. Like I just thought life is like that. Life sucks. I'm always gonna feel numb. I'm always gonna feel anxious. I'm always just gonna be worried. That's just the way life is. I don't know where God is judging me, and that's unconscious. We're not even doing that consciously. And that's the whole thing. When I looked up the actual definition of disassociation, and when you look it up, then what you see a lot is it is a psychological response where individuals experience a disconnection from their thoughts, from their feelings, or their sense of identity. And this detachment serves as a defense mechanism against overwhelming stress or trauma. So growing up with a mother who was depressed, my mom, like I told you, we were having this conversation offline, and I had a conversation with her yesterday. She was worried about a family member who's going through some things, and it ended up about trauma. And once again, she's, I didn't give you any trauma. And I was like, let me break down the list of all of the things.
You didn't hear me the last. I please before, Mom. You didn't hear me. All right. Let me repeat it to you again.
Like I was. But she was really quiet this time when I was telling her. And I think it finally hit her because I came from a place that was not like accusing. It was more like just matter of fact. The fact that you used to hit us with the chancla and with the cinto. The fact that you used to punish us. You wouldn't let me go out. You were so angry all the time. Like it was like a whole thing. And that causes what we're talking about here, disassociation, because you don't feel loved from your own parents, so you go into this like emotional numbness where it's a pervasive sense of detachment from emotions, which leads to very being absent in emotional response, not being a good little Catholic girl, making sure you don't look angry and all this stuff. How I was, you're crying and your mom would be like, Ven, so I can give you something to cry for and stuff like that. Again, I told her, you didn't do that consciously. You didn't even know how to raise us. You were just the same thing that I did the best with my sons. But now the difference is that, and I told her this too, I go, the difference is that my son had got nothing on me because I'm on this healing journey. And mom, if you really want to break the cycle, you're gonna have to work on yourself. And she was really quiet about it and then listening. Why? Because even on TikTok, she has a lot of doctors that are talking about this. It's not just me, right? So now I think it's hitting her a little bit differently, but that's what happens. And then you're going through depersonalization. That I've seen, I thought I was bad, but I've seen serious cases of this where literally, because especially as a child, and if you go through serious abuse, you're groomed. You're absolutely groomed to believe it's your fault, to believe you caused this, you attracted it, or even like upset and angry because why didn't I just tell somebody? Why wasn't I angry back then? Because your brain was still formulating itself and what you learned to do as a young child, because all as a young child is love and light in everyone. And you don't understand that if someone's doing something to you, like, why would I hate them? You wouldn't. You're a pure consciousness. So then what do? We start to depersonalize. That one's scary. And I have seen serious causes of this. Where, like I said, the second week they come to me, they're like, oh, that shouldn't have happened to me. That was not right. And what is this? We feel disconnected from our bodies. We don't feel safe in our bodies. It's almost like we're observing ourselves from an external vantage point. And I'm not talking about self-awareness at all, because self-awareness through meditation is very powerful. It's this running away literally from your body. Like you do not want to be in that present. And like I said, you create like these two worlds. In this world it happened and it did happen and I'm running from it. But guess what? In this world, I'm smiling. I'm living a life. Look at my successes in business. Look at my success. In fact, a lot of the people that have the most success, like in money, it's because they're trying to prove something, right? That's not real prosperity. Why? Because they're so depersonalized from their truth. There's also memory gaps, like what you were talking about right now, where you experience lapses in memory, particularly concerning very specific events, personal information, and even periods of time. That was very common for me. It didn't, things started to come back after I started doing Kundalini yoga therapy. I was like, oh, that's what hurt me so much. Even things like in first grade that didn't even involve my mom. Like I remember through my meditation practice, there was this little boy in first grade that me and my best friend both liked. And that little boy liked both of us. But then towards the end, I felt that he liked her more. That was very traumatic for me because all I wanted was to be liked and approved of. And so I still remember, like, there was a memory that came back to me when I was like in the drinking fountain and he was right there and he ignored me. That developed a wound inside of me that maybe I'm not likable, maybe I'm not good enough. So all these different things. And it's not that we have to go back and remember everything because I didn't remember everything. I don't know about you, but it's more about just we got to work with the nervous system that holds these memories and the brain. Is that kind of what you were experiencing as well?
Yeah, but I do want to mention how when you spoke to your mom, associated as well. And that's why she reacted that way with you when she was raising you and your sisters and your brother, because he was completely disassociated from whatever it was that she lived through, that it was difficult for her to process. So it's a pattern that, again, it goes back to, it's a pattern that keeps repeating itself until somebody stops it and says, okay, this is what is happening here. We need to stop it. Because I've had situations even now now that I'm older, when I went through the dark nights of the soul, even now, even we get so much awareness that I'm like, wait a minute, this happened.
Mm,
And this was not okay. And now I understand, oh, this is where my abandonment wound comes. Like where that whole thing that would play out in my head every time I would have an argument with my husband.
mhm,
We're gonna get divorced. It's over. He's gonna remarry somebody else. I'm gonna end up by myself. Like this whole narrative would play in my head, not realizing where it was coming from. That's actually what my grandfather did to my abuelita. So in my head, it was this program completely playing out itself that I wasn't even aware until that day we're recording. I'm like, wait, that's what is actually playing in my head. Was that? And it could be very difficult when you're remembering, awareness comes.
yes.
Because when you're remembering, you're like, especially if it's very traumatic. I know
Yes.
for me, when I was a teenager, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I completely blocked that out.
Yeah.
Or even now, like there's some that I remember and I'm like, oh, that was very painful. That was hurtful. Like that was mean. Like why would somebody do that? But again, I was just thinking this morning, like I think we all have Judases and they're blessings in our lives because they come to teach us something very valuable.
Mm.
And I was thinking this morning because I was listening to last week's podcast. I always listen to it because I always catch new like things that I miss. I'm like, oh, I missed that. So I always love to listen to them again. And I was just thinking, there's two Judases that I've had. I think we all have many.
Mhm.
They're different levels, but at least right now I have two that I've been struggling for years. Where every day I'm like, God, let me see things differently. Like my mind, like I know they're
Right.
only acting out of their level of consciousness. They're still unconscious. They don't know, they don't realize what they're doing, how painful and hurtful it's been. And at the same time, I don't want to be a victim. I'm not a victim. It taught me so many valuable lessons,
Mm.
but it's hard to accept it because when you start realizing what actually happened, it's hard because to accept it.
Yeah.
You're like, it was not happening to me, it was happening for me. Because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't be a better spouse. I wouldn't be a better mother. I wouldn't be a better sister. I wouldn't. So I get it. Like when people start going through it, it could be very difficult.
Mhm.
But like we said before, I'd rather be here now than where I was before. Because before there was that disconnection with your heart or your soul, even with your mind, like your body, because you're just going forward just with emotions, just moving the movement of this is how it is. But deep down, something's telling you this is not okay. Something's off, something like like something needs to come up and you don't know how to do it until it starts coming up and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Mhm.
And it can be hard and difficult to process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where the psychosis feeling comes because, again, we've worked our entire life to not remember this. And believe me, you are very strong in hiding these things. I'm telling you, I did it. And from personal experience, I can tell you, but I've sat across from women who I swear to you, they did not, never connected their state of physical, mental, and spiritual illness with what happened to them, even if it was obvious to me. It's insane how much we like literally disconnect so that we, as a form of protection, that's really what it is. I'm going to share a story with you that I was allowed to share from an academy member who had an incredibly breakthrough with this. But first, I want to talk about the nervous system and why this is happening. And it leads into her nervous system work that she did with us. And she allowed me to share it. That's why I'm sharing with them. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. But of course, she allowed me to share it. But one thing that we have to understand is the reason why we disassociate unconsciously is because of the trauma and what happens in the nervous system. So we've talked about this a lot, and we have to continue to push this because I think it's just now coming to the light about how important the nervous system regulation is. We stay in fight or flight, right? It prepares our body when we go through trauma. It thinks it needs to survive all the time. So it's constantly having an increased heart rate, rapid breathing, cortisol, adrenaline moving through your body. Then we also go into this like dorsal vagal activation, which is the freeze response. When we cannot fight or fly, the body then enters like a state of immobilization or shutdown. And that's the response of numbness, basically, which is caused by what is known as the vagus nerve. And I want to bring up the vagus nerve today because the vagus nerve has been studied by science for such a long time. They're trying to come up with a pharmaceutical to try to stimulate it because what happens is that if we heal the vagus nerve, everything heals. And of course, there's no pharmaceutical. There's nothing that can do that. There's meditation, and there's a lot of studies around Kundalini yoga meditation with the vagus nerve. But the vagus nerve is like this principal component of the parasympathetic nervous system. And it extends all the way from the brainstem throughout the body, and it influences a ton of other organs. That's why it's like if we get to that, we can heal all of this. It plays like a really important role in modulating your stress responses and maintaining this internal equilibrium. But when we've gone through trauma, we have chronic dysregulation of the vagus nerve. And this is all leading to persistent dissociative states. and other stress-related disorders. And when we think about it from an energetic standpoint, this unprocessed ancestral trauma, which is emotions, grief, sadness, fear, it takes up your life force energy, your breath, your prana. So that's why we disassociate, because we can't stay in the body. We don't feel safe. We don't have enough prana moving through it, because it's what's eating it up is the freaking adrenaline and the cortisol. And that's why you have to take a somatic approach to disassociation. It can't just be like, let's talk about it, right? We have to get to the vagus nerve. We've got to get to the nervous system. And then there's a spiritual psychotherapy work that we have to do of forgiveness, right? Because the ego, which is this program mind, has created all these identities, right? We had this situation where one of my community members reached out to me, and she's doing amazing. Okay. 6 months, no drinking alcohol, which she's always wanted to quit drinking alcohol, lost a ton of weight, a lot of trauma in her family. She comes from a family that is just a lot of trauma, a lot of everything. And it's one of those things that keeps getting tucked under the rug and things of that nature. So she's studying A Course in Miracles, doing the work with us. And she tells me, it finally happened, like what happened to you. So you talk about two Judases. I feel like almost everybody has two Judases, because I feel like in my life, there were two Judases too that I had to deal with. And a big healing moment came for me a couple of years ago, where God made it possible for me to actually confront my Judas and sit in front of my Judas. And what happened to me, it was an out of body experience. I was not there. Physically, it was God running through me. The words that came out of me when this encounter, and I have a witness, thank God. My sister was actually there watching all of it. And she's, do you remember what you said? I was like, I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything. And this brought so much healing to myself and to my lineage. Well, this woman comes to me, she's, I remember you telling me that story, and guess what happened to me? She's, I've just been doing my meditations. I've been doing the work like you told me, keep minding my own business. Her abuser, since she was a child, was riding a bike by her. And she thought it was weird too, because why is he even around that area? And sadly, he's a family member too. So you know how that is, right? So she's telling me these things, and my program, I know the work, right? The work is see the Christ in that person. But I'm like, this guy's an abuser, and he's still coming around her. F that. Put that mother in jail. What if he's still doing this to someone else? That was my initial reaction. And God was like, as I was having those thoughts and she's telling me these stories, I was like, God's, hold on, stop. Let her tell you the story. So I stayed quiet. I was like, but God, what? I wanted to tell her, go get this guy and put him in jail. You know what I mean? And she kept going, and she's, I don't know what happened, but something took over me the way you've said. And I just started talking to him, and I talked to him, and I don't exactly remember what I said, but he looked at me and he said to me, you're a trip. And then he just left. Like, he totally walked away. And God told me right there in that moment in time, and she's, I felt so liberated. I felt like that's the conversation that I wanted to come have forever. I was not angry. I was stable. Something was coming out of me. And then God said to me, that is how he's never going to do this again to anyone else. See, we could have put him in jail. We could put him, and believe me, if they're still abusing people, that's exactly what needs to happen, right? Because, or somewhere where they could be healed. But she stopped that from happening ever again, because she was able to see the Christ in him. The guy was like, I've never received this type of, like, she was giving him advice. And then he walked away. I go, that's what's going to stop the pattern. He's never going to hurt anyone else again. That's what God was telling me. And I told her, what you just shared with me, a lot of people are not going to understand it. They're going to be like, no, you should have done this and you should have done this. Why? Because their nervous systems are stuck in fight and flight. When she was telling me this, again, I got reactive right away, right? I wanted to get justice. I wanted to deal with this, but she's like, you don't understand the level of healing that happened in my life. That's why I don't have to drink alcohol anymore. That's why I don't need revenge anymore. That's why I don't even need an apology anymore. And I told her, you set so many people free. and no one has to understand it but you. So that's what I mean by all of this. And believe me, she was completely disassociated. When she came into our academy, she was just like, wait, that wasn't good? I, people walking all over me, people taking advantage of me, people like, wait a second. Where she has literally healed her marriage, put boundaries, the guy completely turned around, and she was able to face this Judas, have this conversation without anger, and completely liberate herself. And this is how it happens. Does that make sense? Like, it's insane. I get chills over it.
And not everybody's going to understand it. I know there's times where before I always felt so defensive. Like I had to defend myself. I had to. It's weird because I felt like I didn't have a voice even as a child, even as an adult. But at the same time, like I always felt defensive. It was weird. I don't know how to explain it. And even not that long ago with my Judases, I always felt like I had to defend myself. I had to respond and send a text like, what do you mean you're telling me this? Like, no, what about this? And what about that? Whatever. And I've learned to just, you know, just stay quiet and not speaking my voice, not to engage because that person's not hearing me. They're not there. They're unfortunately, it's sad, but they're so far off that they can't hear. They don't hear me. They don't hear nobody around them. They're so engulfed in that ego of themselves. Unfortunately, there's some people they can't hear anything. I pray to God that man, if she felt it, that he heard it. That's why he was like, "You're a trip." Couldn't say anything else. He couldn't. I was so blessed that when I started, because I started with the Kundalini yoga. And then right after that whole leadership program came in, where my daughter's going at right now. And that was just like another jump. And then I tried to do the Course in Miracles, and it wasn't like, I was like, I put it off for years. And I was still committed to the yoga and the meditation, and all this stuff started happening all at once. But I'm very grateful because I have a girlfriend who she could see it. I didn't know what was happening. I wasn't aware. I was starting to, but I wasn't. She'd be like, "Oh, here, girl, read this book." So good. And I would be like, "Okay." And I would read it, and I was like, "Okay." And I got to this other book. Read it. It's so good. And I knew what she was doing, but I knew, but I didn't know. I know she was trying to help me, but she was so kind and so patient because she was outside and she could see what's happening inside. You know what I mean? She could see. It's like when they say when you're on the outside, you could see in and you could see a lot more clear. And she knew what was happening, but she didn't come out straight and tell me. It's like when you have your coaching sessions, you're like, okay, do the meditation. I want you to do this and the Course in Miracles, blah, blah, blah. And then when it comes to you, because there's many of us, like in our women's group, that they didn't understand what we were saying until later. They were like, oh, now I understand what you guys are saying.
Yeah.
So she would just, oh, listen to this. Oh, listen to this podcast. Read this book. And it wasn't until later I was like, you knew, didn't you? You knew what I was going through. You knew my disassociation that I had, that I couldn't see things clearly. And she was just giving me a little nudge, that little knowledge, very kindly, very gently, until I was like, wow. And I knew she couldn't tell me. She didn't know how I was going to react, if I was going to get defensive. You don't know. You don't know anything. What do you mean? You're going to tell me you're just coming to my life, you're my friend, and you're going to tell me you know everything that's happening with me? You know what I'm going through? You know what I mean? She was very careful, and I'm so grateful for that, because some people, you can't just go. Like a lot of times we're so used to wanting to have that control. You want to tell everybody, like our family, how to heal. It's like, what are you talking about? Crazy. The way we've always done it. Everybody's fine. Everybody's fine. And we're all fine. What do you mean? And no, we're not.
That's my dad's like number one line. I don't need anything. I'm good. I'm like, okay, let me give you like,
Here's
so she was basically your friend was like planting these little seeds. And that's why when it's you and I have talked about this, like when you are willing to heal, willing to see things differently, like the universe, God brings the right people, the right books. That's why I'm saying if somebody's listening to this around there, oh my God, I am so disassociated, right? I don't even know where to start. I'm willing to see things differently is the best start because there are so many paths to healing, I believe. There are a lot of different ways that you can get to healing. This is we're sharing our own personal journey and how we got here as well, but so many ways to actually do that. The one thing that is common is you got to address the nervous system, you got to address the brain. And what was really important for me that I think a lot of people take lightly is the spiritual psychotherapy work of A Course in Miracles, because that is how I was able to release all these identities, because the course, which is the teachings of Jesus Christ, talks a lot about the ego, which is basically that's what perpetuates disassociation, because the ego is like the program of the identities we develop. So the trauma happened, and then we developed this identities inside of ourselves of I'm unhealable, I'm bad, I'm all these different things, right? And the program is what keeps you. And when you think about the word disassociate, it's disconnected to me. That's what it means. And ultimately, what are we really disconnected from? God. That's really what it's doing. And trauma, this is why I've always had arguments with God. And yes, I do have arguments with God, because I was like, why God? Like you people go through trauma, and children should never go through trauma, right? And then all this stuff happens afterwards. So it wasn't enough that they went through the trauma. Can you come and assist? You know what I mean? And I've had to do a lot of healing around that too, just being able to see neutrality, not bypassing, but truly seeing a person as whole and complete, not as broken or as they need to be saved. When I was an unhealed healer, I was definitely doing that a lot, but it was because of my program. It was the ego, and the ego does a really good job. It's completely insane to make sure that you continue to stay disconnected from God. And that's the big awakening that I believe is happening in this new age of Aquarius, where if we're really all talking about trauma now, if there are plant medicines that are going to help people, if there are things like Kundalini yoga that are going to help people, then we're going through this period of it needs to be brought to the light. The darkness has to be brought to the light. And there was this guy, I love him, William Donahue. He studies the Bible, and then he talks about the true teachings of the Bible, about meditation, about what our Christ was really trying to tell us, and all of these. And he was talking about this supernova eye that NASA found in the 1980s in the universe. And this was the eye of light. And this is the eye of God, where everything is, you see everything. God is seeing everything. And he said that we were going to get to a point, 2025, 2026, where the people that have been living in darkness, the people that have been manipulating, the people that have been taking over the DNA, they're gonna be exposed, and they're gonna be howling, and remember I was telling you that I feel like God's hand is here, but that's why they want to keep us away from meditation, because meditation right now, my God, is a gazillion times more powerful than it was even 5 years ago. Why? Because Mother Earth is coming right into the middle of the Milky Way again. So to connect with this eye, which is not outside of you, you are the universe. Without you, there would be no universe. It's within you. Instant healing, instant manifestation, co-creation. That's why they're doing such a great job about making people feel afraid about this. And it is scary for us. I don't know about you, but of course, like you said, I felt lost. I felt even more disassociated for periods when I was doing the healing work. But now I've learned to really pay attention to when that ego is coming back up, or even outside spiritual attacks. We got to be honest, they exist. And if you're here as a light bearer, if you're here as a cycle breaker, if you're here to respond with love instead of react with pain, there's going to be a lot of opposition. But that's not something I'm not scared about. I don't know. How do you feel about all of that?
No, I'm not scared about it at all. At all. I think God has shown me since I was very young that as long as He's in my heart, nothing else can harm me. And at times I've forgotten because I was disassociated for so long, for so many years, most of my life. So then when I finally sat down with myself and started doing the meditation, and we're gonna get into it next week when the dark nights of the soul that were for me, is there was this disconnection, but at the same time, we're like, it's scary when you come to the awareness what you thought wasn't, and you come to, oh, this is what really is. I think that's where, I don't know, my connection to God got so much more stronger.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And like I said last time, I did go through a phase where I was very angry at him
Yes.
because I was going through difficult times. And I'm like, what is this? Is this a joke to you? Is this funny to you? He's like, how do you permit this? How do you allow this? Are you playing games? You're up there just laughing at us like, I mean, they're going through all this shit and
Yeah.
they don't even understand. But it's, I also realize how we're so entitled that we just want everything right now. That he's, no, you have to earn your way to heaven. Because otherwise you're not gonna value it. You're not really gonna appreciate it. So that's where the ascension process comes in, that we need to go through these levels of awareness in
Mhm.
order. So we are worthy. It's not like we're not worthy. It's just that we are like fully in our, how we're supposed to be, what he's trying to teach us to be able to finally be in heaven with him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just gonna act like entitled children, spoiled little brats, yeah, and just and making it everything chaotic when he's, no, this is not what I want. It's like little kids. You're teaching them. We're his kids. You need to teach little kids. If you allow a kid to throw a fit, if you allow it since they're a child, because they're gonna push you to see how far they can get with you.
Yep.
If you allow it, they're gonna keep doing it to you all their lives. They're like, well, put up with me. I'm gonna throw my fits, and I'm gonna get on the ground, and I'm just gonna kick and fight and yell until I get what I want.
Correct.
So we're entitled to that. We want everything like this in an instinct, and God's, no, you gotta earn it. You gotta act right. Don't earn all this crap, and everybody needs to get in this journey. And I think a lot of people, that's where we're seeing the mental illness, that he's giving us a choice.
Right.
We're seeing that so much, and we're being attacked all over in our food,
Yes.
social media. Like, you think everybody's, oh my God, look at her flat stomach. Got time to like, and then the angle, and they take the picture, and you're like, little waist, and you're like, I don't know, they're poisoning us, like pharma controlling everything, making all these viruses and all this to come out with the medication. And then all these foods, they own all the foods, the main companies, giving us all these ingredients that are making us sick. So we keep getting sick, going to the doctor, getting medication, full circle thing happening here.
Mm.
Like, we're going to let them do that to us?
Mm.
We're going to continue? Like, we're being attacked all over. Are we going to just crawl up in a little ball and take it? Or are we going to, because God's behind us.
Exactly.
Always been there. And he
Right.
has an army. So we have to call on him and believe in him and have faith in him and be like, no,
Exactly.
we need to keep moving forward and build our army here on earth. Because both of us together, united, what cannot we accomplish? And finally destroy everything. So that's why when you say the age of the Aquarius, a lot of times I tell my husband, truth is coming out, see?
Yeah.
See what's happening with the government? See how everything's coming to light?
Yeah.
We didn't want to see it. And now when we start seeing, we're like, oh,
There's this,
everything's coming to light, everything.
when we start seeing it, there's disassociation because we don't want to see it.
Yeah, we don't want to see it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Going back, there's so much wisdom that you said right now. But going back to what you were saying, I was angry at God too. And I didn't even know that I was angry at God. And I kept studying A Course in Miracles, and there was one class that when God kneeled. I know it sounds crazy, but God kneeled in front of me. And God was like, I love you. I've always loved you. And then when that happened, I started bawling and I'm like, I could never be mad at you, God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it was because I never thought God would do that. I thought God was like this punishing God. And that's caused by generational trauma because, again, we're doing this unconsciously. If I went through this as a child or as an adult, where were you, God? Where were you when I needed you? So then we do get angry and then we feel guilty for feeling angry at God. So the spiritual psychotherapy or Course in Miracles really helped me become aware that I was doing that and then forgive myself for that as well. Because again, God is so loving, God is so beautiful. And the whole thing about also what you just said is like what is required to heal is presence. You have to be present, like you said. So many of us, we don't even sit with our emotions. We're constantly just on the go because we don't want to feel them. And the ego doesn't allow us to be present. Disassociation is the ego's attempt to escape the pain. And healing requires us to be present. And that's why meditation is not always all love and light. There are some days where I'm processing grief, I'm processing stress, I will say that the last few days have been bliss for me in meditation because I've gained this new awareness of this all-seeing eye, which I saw in my ayahuasca ceremonies, but I didn't know that they were talking about this in the supernova. People should really listen to this episode. It's from 1987, and it goes back to what you were talking about here with the spiritual warfare and the attacks on the outside. Trip on this. In the 1980s, NASA discovered this all-seeing eye that blinks, basically, and they couldn't understand it. And they just knew that it was benevolent and that there was no more data on it. Now they probably know it like the back of their hand, right? And we can experience it. But in the 1980s, it was like a gold rush. So do you remember like the dot coms when everybody was buying the dot coms in 2000? And then in the gold rush in California when they came from everywhere to find the gold, guess what they were chasing after? DNA. So this is so relevant to the generational trauma healing work that we do here because it is the worst thing to the matrix to heal your DNA. Back then, they would grab all this DNA and they had computers that were fast enough back then. Imagine now that could understand the DNA, but instead of, because basically they could pull your DNA, so you take those DNA tests to see where you come from, and they study the strands, and within the strands, they find solutions for healing of cancer. Solutions for healing of Alzheimer's, solution for healing of diabetes. It's in our DNA. But instead of them giving us the solutions in the 1980s, what did they do? They created patents, meaning nobody, if you discovered the solution for cancer, the only way to get it is if you paid this person billions of dollars. So, of course, they didn't give us the solution. What they did is they created the vaccines, they created the pharmaceuticals, they created like what they're trying to do right now. You heard, instead of them dealing with what causes the cancer, they're like, oh, let me create a vaccine to get rid of the cancer. We're not dealing with the foods we're eating. We're not dealing with the stress we're living with. We're not dealing with the generational trauma. So they went after this. So they've always had solutions to all of this, but they've patented because they don't want a healed. I really do even feel that the United States of America has become like this experiment where we just are very commercialized. We're very much about colonization. It's all, they were even saying this about New York, that it's just like an experiment where you live under high levels of stress, you chase the money, you chase the reputation, and it doesn't even make you happy. And people still stay there because they don't want to be considered failures. You have to survive. If you make it there, you have a name for yourself, and people are awakening from that. So they've done these things where they do experiments. I think New York is a big one. LA is also a very big place where they test things out. So we do have these external forces that have always been against the evolution and the second coming of Christ. But what is happening right now is inevitable. It cannot be stopped because it's not just one of us that is healing, it's all of us. And what I mean by healing is, my God, think about it as a cycle breaker. We become the sacrifice for our family, and it's not in a bad way, non-aliving. It's, I'm going to sacrifice so that I can respond with love where everyone else in my lineage has responded with fear, with anger. And it's not easy. Of course not. Because again, if you ask 10 out of 10 people, what would you do in this situation? 10 out of 10 would be like, jail, unalive them, get rid of them. And I've thought about that too. If there has been a ring of these abusers of children that have run this world for such a long time, God, can you just purge? Can you just come with the great apocalypse and cleanse it out? And that's what's happening. Because even in the 1980s, William Donahue was saying that you're going to hear these people howling. They cannot lie any longer. It's gonna come to the light. Whoever was trying to monopolize DNA, whoever was trying to keep us enslaved, it's all coming to the light. And then all of us come together and it all topples. So we're living it. Like it's a trip. We're living through a pole shift. The poles, North and South Pole, science is proving this. This only happens every 20,000 years, and I get chills. We're living through it. And the reason why it's so important for us to know this is so that you can understand yourself better and what you're moving through, so that you can understand how important it is for you to meditate and to and get real with God. I think that's what people are saying. A lot of people, they're just afraid of the biblical apocalypse kind of stories, but those stories, that is not the real God. That's the same God that we've killed so many people under that name. They just want to put you in that fear. I am so freaking excited about the future. I am so that now it makes sense what I've been trying to tell you all, that God's hand is everywhere and that we just have to continue to be disciples. We have to continue to be very disciplined. And we have to continue to be in conviction of love and in conviction of God, and know that our emotions are part of the journey. The toxicity that has to come up is part of the journey. You're not broken. If you're gaining all this awareness of, oh my God, how do I heal from that? That now it's coming to the light. It's totally possible. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be listening to this.
It's awareness and knowledge that's being given to us through God, from God.
Exactly.
And it's very valuable. And a lot of times it could be very painful to accept it.
Yes.
Because it comes from our family or it comes from what we've experienced in our life.
Right.
So a lot of times you're like, this was very painful. What do you mean? This is a blessing from God. This hurt me. I understand. Trust me. I get it. But he's giving us this awareness, this blessing, so we could do better. And we could teach and the ones around us and whoever wants to listen that it is possible to heal and do better. Said when I told you that one time, it stops with me. It does not continue. So if God gave me that in me, it's because he knew, and like I've said, it's not that I'm special and I'm better than anybody else. He's just, I know that you have the strength to accomplish this. And that's why I put it in your hearts. Because if nobody does, like, it takes a lot. It takes time. It takes work. And so people don't have the capability maybe, or the mindset, or they're too, because I think about what they've done with the medical industry and the food industry, how they produce all these medications and they own the food industry. So many companies, they put all these ingredients and make us sick to these keep us like spending money. Like, how do they sleep at night? I don't understand. How do they sleep at night? That all they care about is money? Are you kidding me right now? But there's so many people now that are coming so much aware of what is happening that I think it's God building that army to where they're like, we're not taking this anymore. No, this is not part of God. Like we deserve to be loved and we deserve to be respected. And this is not it.
Exactly.
And having that strength of coming through, I think people get scared, but it's like, what an honor that God believes in us that much. Because I'm not going to say it's just me. There's many of us that we're building this army that we're like, no, something has to change and we all need to unite in order to make that change.
And I think the reason why you and I are able to see that and do that is because we have worked on the nervous system. One of the things that William Donahue was talking about is that there are thieves in your temple. And it's the thieves of the trauma you're running away from, your own shadows that you don't want to accept. But it's also what we're talking about here, the thieves, right? The people that want to even organize religion. Like I said, I love our brother Jesus Christ with all of my heart. But like for them to tell us that we're sinners, for them to tell us that we did this to our brother, for them to not tell us the true story of our brother Jesus Christ, that he came to teach resurrection. I can't wait till Mel Gibson puts that movie out, because that's going to change the world. And I feel like he went through a spiritual awakening enough where he said he has two versions. I know he's going to pick the right one. I know it, because that's the whole thing. We have been programmed in this way. We have been programmed to not know who we are at our core. And when we worked on our nervous, the why we can say these words is because we worked on our nervous systems, we worked on our brain. Is there still more work to be done? Always. We're constantly evolving. I haven't accepted fully the atonement, although all of us are here for that, just the same thing as our brother Jesus Christ. What I do know is, for me, this work is a privilege, like you said. It's my meditation is that's when I'm intimate with God. That lately I've been craving just being quiet in meditation, because Kundalini yoga is very active and it served me perfectly because I had so much trauma and adrenaline going through my body that I could not stay quiet. And my husband is so good about visualization and just being quiet in meditation. I never understood him, right? And he does have a daily sadhana. He does his Kirtan Kriya meditation, and then he chants Lakshman 11 times. And then he goes into like deep quietness. And I've been craving that more lately. So I've been introduced 11 minutes of just sitting quietly. And I swear to God, it was like a blink of an eye. If it was so fast. Why? Because my nervous system is different now, where I can feel God from within me. I don't have to, when we disassociate, we run away from our bodies. We don't feel safe in our bodies. We Yes, because of the adrenaline and cortisol, but it's because of the freaking guilt and the shame. And again, having this concept of God being this man on a chair judging us all day. That was another thing that William Donahue was talking about, that the age of Aquarius is about understanding that God is light, that you are light, and that through activation, he said that the scientists found 144,000 DNA strands. So what that number's all over the Bible. The 144,000 chosen ones. It's not actual people, it's your chakra centers coming into alignment. They actually add up to 144,000, which equals the Christ consciousness. What is the Christ consciousness? Unconditional love, radical acceptance. You're not bypassing, you're not dumb, you're not letting people walk all over you, because that's not our brother Christ. What you're doing is, I'd rather be at peace than I'd rather be right. I'd rather learn to live in my temple. And that's why the kingdom of heaven is bestowed upon you. I know what you mean. I don't necessarily think people need to earn it. It's that they have to work to dismantle. We're worthy. We're worthy. And I even believe in miraculous healings. I believe that if you have a good relationship with God, you don't even have to do the meditation. You don't even have to just talk to God. And that's when it's tough for me, when I'm praying for someone or when I needed really a lot of help. I was like, God, this is where you come in, because this is not even of the earthly sphere. I can't forgive this person. I can't, but I need you said you're powerful. You said you're powerful, right? So I need you to come help me, and I need you to show me the way. Prior to my healing journey, I didn't do that because I didn't think God would listen to me. I didn't think God was a loving God. So the way we become the 144,000 is we clear the DNA strands. And how do we do that? Yes, meditation, absolutely. But again, it's just healing the relationship you have with you and ultimately healing the relationship with God, which is what the spiritual psychotherapy did for me, because it's not like it was forcing me to remember from A Course in Miracles all the bad things that happened to me. It's just confrontational, because it tells you you are the light. You are not a guilty sinner. It tells you you are worthy. It tells you do the inner work so that you can remember that. Is that kind of what you've experienced as well?
Yeah. And I think what you said right now, it's not that we're not worthy of getting into heaven. It's like we need to just forgot the word you said right now. We just the awareness, because everybody's been so disassociated for so long. So you can't go into heaven being disassociated and not acknowledge what you need to acknowledge and really, I don't know if fix, but like just clear out all this toxicity, all this bad stuff that it's not of God.
Exactly.
that is not of God. We need to just really get rid of all this that is not of him.
Yeah.
To really be able to, and heaven is here. It's
Yeah.
how we live life and how we experience, how we show ourselves in with our families, with our loved ones. And it's funny because I'm around certain family loved ones that I think, do you rather be right or do you rather have peace? Or so a lot of times I'm okay listening to them. They don't understand. It's fine. But there's certain people that if you don't, what I've seen is that if I stay quiet and you don't call them out on serious things that they're doing, they feel you're approving of it.
Mhm.
They keep doing it more and they go even big and they do it even, and it's like an abuser, I guess it would be. If you don't call them out, they think, oh, I'm just going to keep doing it. They're not telling me anything. Nobody's saying anything to me. So I just keep doing it. So and I've had people tell me, they're like, you're right. I stayed quiet. I said, I'm not going to call them out anymore. I'm just going to, that's who they are. I'm going to let them be. And they keep expanding to doing it even more and more, where it's not okay what they're doing. So when you call them out, it's no, this is me not speaking to you. It's me putting my foot down.
Right.
That you need to understand that's not okay. But I also understand they're completely disassociated from what really is.
Right.
And that's where I think next week comes into the psychosis that you're going through, because I do feel they're going through some level of psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're losing control of everybody. They've had so much control, at least people in my life, they've had so much control that they're losing the control, that they're going into this state of psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's God giving you the opportunity. What road are you going to choose? Are you going to really choose my road, what I'm trying to teach you here? Or are you going to stay stuck in the ego? And that's what we need to dismantle, is that ego of all these people that all they want is money for themselves, don't care about humanity, don't care about really healing, and all these people owning all these patents. Really, I don't understand. How do you sleep at night? It doesn't, how disassociated are they
Radical.
that they think that's okay?
Yeah.
That all they care about is they're just living their life and everybody and just making money off of us? That's association right there. Talk about dissociation. Gee.
Yeah. And I think that it's coming to the light. Like I think that this world has been ran by reptilians and completely sick people. And that's what's scary. Right now, there's a big thing going on with Candace Owens. You know who she is? She's like a journalist. So have you seen her show with Becoming Brigitte?
No, I've seen little clips here and there, but I haven't, but I do follow her. But she doesn't come up to me a lot.
This is the trippiest story in the world. Okay. So she went, and there was this rumor going around in France that he's not the king. I don't know what he is there, but I guess he would be considered like a president. Who he was married to was actually a man, that it wasn't a woman. So then she got all into it, and then the French government sent her this like legal letter that says she better stop researching. So instead of her stopping researching it, she researched it more.
Yeah. That's fine.
So then she did this 5-part series, and I was like, why do they need to be 5 parts? Like, where is this going? You know what I mean? Dear Lord, my God. I finally saw the last one yesterday. Dude, not only is this guy a man, this is all, by the way, alleged information from her. This is for entertainment purposes. Everything I'm saying here right now has not been fully proven by the court of law. This is all alleged, what I'm sharing with you. So she went down the freaking family tree, and what she came up with is that not only is that guy a man, but that guy is the president's father. We're talking about incest. These are the people that are running the world.
Yes.
This is the kind of disgusting stuff that, by the way, they try to put into society. Why do you think there was such a big push for transgenderism? For this is how you debilitate a society. This
Yes.
is how, because And again, I'm sure that there's a long lineage. They mentioned a particular family already. It starts with an R, and everybody knows them. They patented the pharmaceutical industry. They are known for incest. They believe that having babies with your own family is the only way to keep that in the lineage. And that's why this is so shocking, because I think, in my opinion, this it's not just France where this is happening. It's all over the world, all over the world. And this is the kind of sickness that has been completely taking over humanity. And this is what the eye of God is cleansing and purifying. And I truly do believe this, because think about it. God says you can't enter into the kingdom of heaven alone. You have to bring your brothers and sisters, right? It's the singularity. That's what they're talking about. That's what Kabbalah talks about, transferring the zeros to one, meaning those traumatic experiences, being able to see God in them, because this is a university, right? We're all doing that already. We're standing against this. We're not allowing it. They try to do this so many times where they try to make it normal. There's even a while where they were trying to say that it's normal for adults to be attracted to children. Like, what the seriously? My life purpose is to help women break generational cycles of trauma. But if something like that happened, where they try to push that into legislation, I'd be the first one lobbying. I'd be the first one running for office. I'd be the first one. None of that will ever be okay. We are being operated by, I don't even know if they're human. They might be reptilians, but let's not even give them that excuse, because they probably are, but they're completely soulless because they've sold their soul, because they practice rituals, they practice dark magic. And this is what's so hard for people to accept and to understand. And that's why I really feel that the disassociation is getting worse right now, because there's serious cognitive, and for a while it messed me up. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I think they do this on purpose, where I was invested in all these things and it made me feel like, again, why God? Where are you? Where are you? Where, thank God, with the Course in Miracles, it took away my, because they want you to lose the love you have for God. They want you to see this world as just a horrific place, that they want you to keep you away from the Holy Spirit. And I had this conversation with my mom yesterday, because we were talking about trauma, and she was like so quiet. I could tell that it really affected her, all the things that I was telling her, the reality of what's going on and what's happening. And I told her at the end, Mom, the only thing I'm going to tell you after this, because I've told you this before, but I think you were disassociated, like you said, is that I don't want you to lose your faith in God. I don't want you to lose the love for God that you have within your heart. I don't want you to feel that this world is completely corrupt. That's what they want us to believe. It's so important for us to, right now, because all this stuff is coming to the light and it's only going to happen even more, that we don't disassociate, that we get stronger in our meditation practice, that we get stronger in our prayer. If you like to go to church, be in community. That's so important. Next week, we'll talk about spiritual psychosis and why community is so important, because without community, you literally, it will be very difficult to be able to overcome something like this. But yes, all of this is true, but by the same token, so is God and so is love. And that's, I think, so important to say, because we don't want anyone to feel depleted, or what's the point of even living if this whole world is like it is? You know what I mean?
I think the world has been like this for a very long time.
Mm.
We just disassociated from it. We didn't want to see it. We didn't want to accept it. We wanted, but it's all coming to the light, because there's so many of us opening our eyes and seeing things clearly.
Yeah.
And now we can see it. So it could be very scary, because you're seeing it and you're like, whoa, this is the world. And like your mom, she's seeing it now, and it could be scary. And that's when we need, like you said, we need to unite more with God. He's always been here. He has an army, and he's building an army here on earth with us. So that's been happening for a long time,
Okay.
for a long time. It's just that now it's all coming to the light, and we need to stay united. We need to stay stronger. You know what I mean? And not be afraid of it, because if God has our back and we know it in our hearts, if we truly feel it and know in our hearts that he's with us, we're not alone.
Thanks. So.
He has an army behind him. That army is behind us, and he has our support. We just need to keep moving forward and stay strong with it. Because like I said before, when they used to talk about the Matrix, I was like, I don't understand. I didn't get it.
Right.
Now I really do get it. I'm like, no, they want to keep us asleep. They want us to keep us disassociated, disconnected from our roots, from our families, from our children. Like this, I've been thinking so much about work and being at the house and trying to take care of my family and cook and eat healthy and try to get it all together. I'm like, this is insane. Like now I like how do like you can't be in everything and do everything. Like it's impossible. And they want us to be like that. They want us to keep us in this level of stress, disconnected from our children, disconnected from our spouses, keep us like this, fighting constantly because that's our cross that we need to carry. Those are our enemies. No, we need to fight and not give in to what they're trying to do to us because that's not okay.
And we have to learn to get connected to God so we can stop disassociating. I just watched this creepy movie about that. It's called Vivarium. Have you seen it?
No, vivarium.
Oh God, it is creepy as it's about that. It's about how they put you in this trap of you got to get married, you got to have the kids, you got to have the house. But it's really trippy because it's this couple that goes looking for a house and then they put them in this neighborhood where they can't get out of the neighborhood. It just takes them in a loop around and around. I'll let you watch it. It is freaky. My husband and I watched it together and we are like, why are we watching this? But but the reason why it feels so scary is because of what you just described. It's this rat race. It's this disassociation this from what really matters, what really is important, which is your spiritual health, your mental health, your physical health, right? Those are the real things that matter because you could have billions of dollars and you don't got none of those three. Who cares? Who cares? But again, it's like we've been experiments for this to see how much we can get them to be capitalistic. And now and this is because of the changes of Mother Earth and the second coming of Christ, we ain't buying it. And we're like, mm-mm. Not even things like the pandemic really worked. Like they tried, but you see the real comments and the things that you see online, it's no one is trusting right now these higher ups, which is why they need to be dismantled. We need to be careful about the fact that this is a mafia and it's old money now fighting against new money. So they just rebrand themselves too. When the Roman Empire collapsed, they just rebranded themselves into something else. So we need to just be very conscious and aware. But I do believe that God is so present and that this is what our ancestors, the Mayans, the indigenous tribes, even from Hinduism, you go way back, they've all talked about this time that you and I are both moving through, that the entire universe is moving through. And no one knows what happens afterwards. But what I do know is that this is the time for you to get yourself right with God. This is the time for you to deal with those shadows. This is the time for you to deal with the resentment. This is the time for you to connect from within so that your temple is guarded by the highest power and that you don't allow the thieves to come in to then allow you to become disassociated from this beautiful world because this is heaven. We just have been living under chronic stress and chronic trauma that we don't even realize it. So those are my last words. What are your last words for somebody that maybe it just dawned upon them that they've been disassociating from all of their lives or their life?
Be kind to yourself. It could be shocking. It could be very shocking to like, what? This is not what I thought, but it's just feel it. Just give your time to actually feel it and it'll pass. At least for me, I was very grateful because I did ask God, I want to see things clearly, everything and everyone, and including myself. And he showed it to me and it hurt me. But I know deep down inside, I always knew.
Mm,
I always knew. I just didn't want to see it because it was painful to accept it.
mm,
But a million times, I'd rather know the truth than to be in blinded and following the sheep and the wrong of what is not even from God. I think the truth is always going to be God,
mm.
100%.
Oh,
I'd rather know the truth whether I like it or not.
I love that. I love that. The truth is God. That's a perfect way to end it. If you want to stop disassociating, if you want to feel safe in your body, if you want to feel safe in this world, the truth is God. And only you can have that experience with God. No one else can tell you what God is, or it's not, I could have tried to describe, but there's no way. There's no words. We have to create that personal experience. And one way to do that, ladies, is through meditation, because the kingdom of heaven is within you. And regulating that nervous system allows you to contain these. That's the whole thing about disassociation. We don't want to contain these really heavy emotions that our ancestors couldn't contain. With the regulated nervous system, you got more prana, more vitality in your system. Your nervous system not only can contain them, it can process them and finally alchemize them and transform them so that no one else in your lineage has to go through this. So thank you, Elvira. That was very beautiful and very wise. If you are somebody that finds yourself on this journey and you're listening to this, and this is a sign, a very big sign, not everyone answers yes to the call. So if you have the courage to start to really work on this, then we invite you to join us at Satori Vitality and Spirituality. Right now, the Sovereign Sisterhood Academy for Generational Healing is not open for enrollment. However, if you're especially finding yourself in situations where you are disassociating, you're feeling numb, the real problem there is there's not enough vitality. There's not enough prana moving through your system. And at Satori, that's exactly what we focus on. We work on each of the 10 energetic bodies every single month, one body per month, to help you increase the vitality so you can have more self-awareness, more deeper, intimate connection with the divine, and so that you can start to release these stuck emotions that get stuck throughout the body, the mind, and the spirit. So I'm going to link below the actual link so you can go find out more information. Feel free to message us if you have any questions. I'm also going to link below this really amazing podcast episode from this William Donahue gentleman who just completely opened my eyes and awareness of just how important it is, especially right now, ladies, to really take your sovereignty back. And also, thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. I reminded myself that I was going to say this more throughout the episode, and then I completely forget. So please continue to do that. Thank you for sharing this podcast with your sisters, with your family. We are growing a movement of generational healing globally. We are reclaiming our sovereignty back at the level of the DNA, and we'd love for you to join us. So thank you. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing. And we're going to see you next week where we're going to talk about spiritual psychosis as it relates to generational trauma. We'll see you next week. Satnam.